Hello, everybody, and welcome to Travel Scope on this Travel Tuesday. And we're so excited to have you with us. Today, we're going to be chatting with our special guest, Kristin Winet. She's a travel journalist and photographer, and we are going to be discussing the problems and solutions with 21st century travel writing and digital media. If you didn't know there's problems and solutions, well, we're going to discuss it today. So, but
there's no problems at all. Let's get that straight. It's paradise.
I know.
Up there, Lori.
That's easy. There's a 5-step, process that takes you 5 minutes to do it all. Anyone can do it. Anyone can do it. In your sleep.
It's true. But so before we kick it off, I want to thank our illustrious ladies down below me here who are co-hosting, carrying means of walking on travel, and Desiree Miller of Desiree Miller, a little bit of everything. But Kristin, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. And you and I were talking a few minutes before we got started, and I was just telling you how excited I was when I read your questionnaire that we kind of sent out to our guests. Your enthusiasm and background just got me so excited for this discussion today. And I think it's one of them in tourism, travel writing in the tourism industry that we need to have more of. So welcome, welcome, welcome. So
so glad to be here.
Yay! Well, let's, I want to jump right into things because I think this is a great interactive topic. But first, Kristin, tell us a little bit about you, what you do right now, and then we'll kind of jump into how you got there in a minute.
Okay, what do I do right now? Okay, so I'm kind of a one person by day, one person by night kind of person. So during the day, I am a writing teacher. I work at a small college in Palos Verdes, California, and I research travel and tourism and writing and how all of that sort of blends together with feminism and all those conversations that come out of that. And by night, by weekends, by vacations and holidays, I am traveling and I'm writing about it.
So now, what kind of publications do you do? Mainly digital? Do you do print? Who do you write for?
Oh, that's a great question, Lori. I write for a couple of different places. As a freelancer, it's great because I have that opportunity to kind of go out and find cool places to place things. But I do a monthly column for the in-flight magazine for Eva Air, which is out of Taiwan. I do like a funny humor column about, funny travel situations that I find myself in. And I have this amazing illustrator who illustrates my work for me. And she's just amazing. And so that's kind of a fun outlet for me because it's sort of, the stakes are a little bit lower. I can kind of be myself and I can use the first person and kind of talk about things like that. And I love that Karen. I'm trying to figure out how the comments work and everything at the same time.
It's a lot to keep up with. Karen was saying she needs that illustrator's info.
Yeah.
Like, I need something illustrated. I'm like, oh, yay.
So I've been doing that for about a year. I write for places like Pace Magazine. I do Atlas Obscura for Slate. I write for a bunch of different blogs. Perceptive Travel is one of them that I've been writing for a long time. And, places like that. I would say it's sort of, it runs the gamut of digital blogs to print. So it's kind of
gotcha. You're a true freelancer, so.
Yeah.
And I want to say hi to Davey. Davey just jumped on. As you noticed, Davey's missing here today but she's in Jerusalem right now. And she said it's 7 p.m. in Jerusalem. So, Davey, if you are where you can and you want to jump in, just let us know. Des said she can jump off if you want to jump in here with us. But anyway, so let's get things started kind of where we're going with this. I think it's really important to start out, Kristin. How did you get started in travel? Like I think I read your family was not really a travel family. So how did you get the bug and get started?
The bug. No, that's also a great question. It's kind of a funny story. I grew up in Atlanta, like you, and So yeah, I didn't really come from a travel family. I mean, we would visit family, my grandparents for vacations and things like that. But it wasn't really something that was sort of built into my life as a kid growing up. And so when I got to college, I decided to try out study abroad. Like a lot of college students do. I was at the University of Georgia, and kind of at my mom's cajoling, we sort of figured out how to raise the money, how to get me there, and how to really make it happen. And it was a gift that she really wanted to give me because she never had that opportunity herself. And so I went, and sort of like the traditional narrative of a young girl abroad, I fell in love with it, and I haven't looked back since. I wanted to make it part of my life, so I thought I'm going to do everything I can to make this a part of my life, because I knew I always wanted to be a writer. I wrote my first book when I was in 4th grade, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a little, and I sort of illustrated it myself. It was a sort of Nancy Drew knockoff mystery story.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
I brought it to all my friends in the 4th grade class. It was 87 pages, which is actually quite long.
Yeah.
Wow. 11.
Yeah.
And I showed it around and got feedback, and that was my first kind of foray into sharing my work with a public audience.
That's awesome. Well, speaking of your work, so I think this will kind of help us jump into this. And guys, this is a very interactive topic today. If you are joining us on Blab, please feel free to chime in the comments. If you want to ask a question, if you see there, just do the /Q and a space in your question, and it'll pop up, and we can get that up on the screen. And but again, we want to make this a very interactive conversation, especially for the tourism and travel community. But so Kristin, I think what'll jump us in here is you tell me about briefly about your thesis that you wrote.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So in this kind of quest to make travel writing a part of my life, I realized in a lot of what I was reading that there were problems with travel writing that persist. For all of us who are women who are here today, we're interested in travel, we're interested in writing about it. And what I noticed with this was that there's still so much out there that is colonizing, that is patriarchal, that is not necessarily doing justice to the communities in which we travel and which we want to write about. There's a lot of complications with writing about the other, or writing about people who are different from you. And so I set out to try to wrestle with this problem of representation and otherness in my dissertation in graduate school. And because I think you kind of have to be obsessed with something to write a thesis about it. I think you really have to be like weirdly obsessed with it. And so, I thought about how people write about food. I thought about how people write about their bodies and others' bodies. I thought about how we write about places. And I set out to find an alternative, to see what else is out there, to see what people like us are doing out there, to bring those voices to the front and center of not only the academic community, but also to the public community. Because I realized that, so many of us were thinking about these very complicated issues as travelers, but we weren't always getting the word out and finding a space to think about them in a public way. So that was sort of what led me to my topic, and I finally finished it. But now the hard work is what to do next with it. I don't want it to just kind of sit in the archives. I want to do something with it. I want to start these conversations and get people like us, really bringing travel writing into the 21st century as people who want to make change and who want to do it well and ethically, and represent the communities that we travel to in a good way. So that was sort of my roundabout way of how I got into the topic. Well, because I'm always thinking about it.
Well, you've already got some fans here. So Wooks is, it says you're hot. He doesn't have any questions, but you're hot. And Delia is excited about your thesis. Hot. She is. So, all right. So let's get this started as far as, like, as you said, to truly do something with it. What do you mean by, you had talked about intervening as feminists in traditional travel writing? What does that practically mean to you?
practically mean? I guess I'm still trying to figure that out, specifically what that means, but I'll say this, as a woman, I think we come to travel and travel writing with a different perspective. I mean, there's the idea that, colonizing travel writing, or sort of the travel writing of our past, is just inherently patriarchal, for instance. So it's inherently something that is looking down on the other, passing judgment from the perspective of the more privileged person. And, while I'm still privileged in a sense, I mean, I'm Western, I'm a woman, who has had the opportunities to do this with her life, I do recognize those problems. And I think that's where we need to start, is that, we need to recognize that we are privileged to be in these positions, and that we have a responsibility to our communities and to the places that we travel, to share our stories and to look at things differently. Because there are so many people who are traveling. I mean, in our travel blogging community, I mean, there are so many interesting things people are doing. There are so many interesting communities that we can be a part of, to have these conversations about what it's like to travel as a woman, or a person of color, or a person of different, person of different abilities, differently abled person. There's just so much opportunity out there that I really wanted to kind of harness that and say, how are we traveling? How are other people traveling? And what are they writing about? And how does that differ from the kind of like charming, friendly locals who are there to kind of serve me on my journey into their country?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And speaking of my favorite charming woman of color, it's Miss Davy.
Hello.
I just wanted to say hi quickly, and thank you guys. Thanks, Desiree and Karen. Nice to see you guys again. And hi, Lori and Kristin. So this sounds like a really fun conversation, but I love what Kristin was saying about like rethinking the way we travel. And I just wanted to share a quick story. So I'm in Israel now, and how do you just do this from a kind of travel point of view without kind of getting too much into the politics? How do we tell the whole story of not just the one side of what like the American point of view, but listen to what like American point of view would be like just pro-Israeli, and they have the, what about the Palestine point of view? But then, so like yesterday I went rappelling, and today I went to the Gaza border. And I think that's how you tell the story of the place, and then you talk to the people, and you include that in the whole package of what you're telling. So I love that you took this very academic.
I did.
You'll make it official. So like all of our theories, you'll make it like it'll be in the book. Like Kristin said, this student, Kristin said, so
we're legitimate.
Yeah, legitimate.
We have to legitimize it across all communities and conversations. I think that's where we can make change.
Absolutely. Well, so let me ask you this. Do you think that there's a push and pull? Do you, as someone who has this forefront on their mind in your practical job and how you make money, do you see a push and pull between what you are feeling is what you've expressed in your thesis versus how you can make money? Do you think there's an issue between the PR pull of the way things should be written, or what media expects, or your editors, or things like that?
Definitely. This is something that I talked about a little bit in my thesis, because it's a first person thesis, so it's kind of weird because I'm sort of very present in it. So I kind of broke a lot of boundaries with genre in the first place. So I hope that will make it accessible, because I'm very much not a theory person. I like it, but I'm very much an on-the-ground writer, first and foremost. And I tell this story in one of my chapters about how I was really dismayed one time after submitting some photos for an essay for a print magazine I was writing for about an island in Taiwan, a very small coral island that hasn't been written about very much, called Chaoliocho. And I had gone and I'd taken these pictures, and I was trying to express kind of what the local feeling was on this island. It's a very small, nobody ever really goes there from the West. It's very much sort of a Taiwanese destination. And I was trying to bring it to a wider audience to say, here are some of the interesting things about this place. Here's some of the people that I met, things like that. And before the article came out, the editor decided that my photos wouldn't work because there were quote unquote echoes of poverty in them, such as like rust on a railing in one of the pictures of a building, or a clothesline with clothes on it in the background of one of the landscape shots. And he said, we don't want to see that. We want to present the image of this beautiful resort community. So these photos won't work. And so they replaced them with these sort of bland, photoshopped, hyper-saturated images of this island that didn't look at all like I had visited. And it really, I thought, misrepresented the place that I had come to love in my week there. And I was very dismayed by it, because I thought, if this is the kind of editorial, I understand that the genre of like an in-flight magazine wants to present something in kind of a luxurious perspective, but I also don't think we can ignore all the, socioeconomic realities.
We should tell the truth. I think that's what it is.
Yes.
I actually got uninvited from a press trip when I asked about a border. It was in the U.S., so it was one of our southern borders, but I won't tell you specifically what state. But it was a press trip that they had asked me to join 6 months ahead of time. They really wanted me to go on it, and then for another outlet, they said, "Oh, while you're down there, separate from the press trip, we'll pay for the extra time. Could you go to the border?" And I said, "Oh yeah, that's cool, because that's kind of the work I do, tell the whole story of the place." And I just inquired, because they always say, "Ask us anything." So it was just an inquiry. It wasn't even a firm thing I was going to do the story. And I got uninvited for asking about the border. And this is in the States. This is in the U.S. So I think there's a problem. And Kristin, what would you suggest the solution is, not just on the publication side, but like from the people who are supposed to help you tell the story? How do we do this? I guess besides just doing it on your own time, I guess, and writing about something, but like, how do we make people understand that people still will journey there, but we can't lie about the entire story? Because when they come here, they're going to see poverty, or they might see the border, or they're going to know something else is going on.
Right. Well, that's a great question, particularly because I think it's complicated, because there's obviously the thing that people expect to see when they're reading an article in a particular magazine, and then all the nuances of what's really going on. But I think we need to have more publications that are willing to open up these issues, or conversations like this that get at the heart of like, what other possibilities are there? What else are people saying? And how can we celebrate the different ways that we all enter these spaces and learn about them? Because I think that starting the conversation and making them public is really the way to start having change happen. I think it, like you said, it could be individual and we can all do our own things, but I think we need to actually have the conversations. Is, why are we interested in departing from the kind of colonial narrative that underlies a lot of travel writing? Because we weren't necessarily part of that, to begin with. And I think that it's important for us to say the genre is a lot bigger than we give it credit for.
Absolutely. So Delia is chiming in here, and she said she has struggled with marketing her content while writing the way that she thinks is the most accurate and respectful. Often the terms that have good SEO or are eye-catching in headlines are not the best, or inaccurate and downright offensive. And I love how you put that, Delia. Plus, there's the whole issue of making headlines to cover nuanced issues. Any advice?
Well, Delia, thank you for this question. This is something that I think about a lot, because if you look at, SEO, like headlines that have, good SEO in them, like, 17 ways to really do Paris or something like that. Or, 20 ways to eat your way through so-and-so place, which in a sense evokes eating your way through, devouring, like in leaving things in your wake. It's hard. It's hard because we're already working at an infrastructure in digital media that privileges that kind of writing. And I think that it is something that we're going to have to continue to grapple with is, if we have, say, more nuanced stories or stories that have different kinds of headlines, how do we find an audience for that? How do we get the word out? And I don't know if there's necessarily any advice I can give specifically, because this is something that I'm still grappling with, is do we adhere to the SEO and the marketing in terms of what Google wants, or do we depart from that? And if so, how do we keep the audience? How do we enable people to find us?
But do you not feel that we can have a marriage of those two, that we can still have good SEO and still get a good story out there though?
Absolutely.
I think so too. I don't think it has to be one or the other. And let me ask you this. Do you, standing on your principles of what we're talking about, and that's, this is the issue, is we all have to pay our mortgage with our job, but then we're very principled on what we're doing. Do you turn down jobs, or do you take them and grumble with the 5 things to do in Paris, 20 places to have the best beignets, wherever you've gone, and, how do you handle that?
Well, I will say that I think list articles are kind of a little bit outside of what we're talking about. Really, I think what I meant with my last comment was just the whole, like, when people say things like eating your way through or something, which can evoke sort of a colonizing, like, I'm going to come in and take what I want and then leave. But I think lists are fine. I think because you're right, and I've done them, and I have to pay the bills, but I think I recognize that the 5 things that I pick out are not necessarily the 5 things that you might pick out. And it's interesting. There's this really interesting book that a writer did on a people's guide to Los Angeles, which I read when I knew that I was moving here. And she kind of grapples with that same question in terms of, like, what is a guidebook? Which is typically a sort of edited version of what one person or one community of people think is important about a place. And she flips it on its head, and she goes and finds all the places where events of historical significance to Latino women have happened in Los Angeles, and brings those to the forefront of the travel guide. And so it's kind of like this alternative history that says, hey, a traditional travel guide might not mention any of these places, but these are places that I feel are important that we should be looking at. And so in that way, it's kind of subversive, because she's, giving us another history, or like Davey was saying, like another set of stories that, we don't always hear. So I think we can play with the constraints and the sort of genre as we know it. But I think that's a really good question, is how do we do that and pay our bills and our mortgages and all that stuff.
Davey, can you still hear us, Davey? Are you still on audio?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. I can hear you. I know you and I have had this discussion, and I wonder if we're kind of on the crux of kind of helping this all happen, in a sense, with the whole millennial push. There's so much more, people are paying attention to millennials traveling with more meaning and things like that. Do either of y'all see a slowly begrudging change and shift in the tide of the type of writing that you are either being requested for, or that editors are more open to now, if couched in, in those perspectives that they know the buzzwords of, such as millennialism and things like that?
I think it's a combination, and it really depends on the outlet. So, like, if you have a reputation of doing what they like, I think an editor might be more open, from my experience, to saying, oh, we'll try this and see how it works. And they still do care about, like, SEO, how's it going to play, if it gets a lot of clicks, if it was really popular. And the other approach that I've been taking lately, and I don't know, Kristin, if you've ever tried it, or Lori, you too, is pitching non-travel publications.
Absolutely.
For the story about the travel, that I've discovered on the travel. So I pitched, so I have a story that did really well for this website, with the whole election interest and what's going on. I don't know about you guys, this is a little side note. Everywhere I go, people are fascinated with our election and the possibility of having Donald Trump as president. It's always conversation, and I'm like, I can't escape it. But anyways, I did a story about Black American expatriates living in Norway, and it was on theroot.com, which used to be owned by NBC, but now they're their own entity. Actually, they're owned by Univision now, and they focused on African American stories. So I think that's how, like, if you hit the wall, probably within those constraints. But as far as the limiting just to like the demographic, I think there's more outlets. I think there's more opportunities. My experience.
Absolutely. Hey, I want to take a quick minute and just welcome Eva, Kevin, Milan, and David joining us here on Blab. And if anybody is in the tourism industry, writers, editors, PR, if you do want to jump in on this discussion, please feel free to chime in the comments, or we do have one open seat. If you're in the tourism industry and want to kind of add to, this is a great conversation. We'd love to have you. Just click on the open seat and sign in. So, and Davey, are you out of here?
Yeah.
All right. Hey, have a great time, and thanks for joining us from Israel. It was so awesome that you were able to do so.
Okay, see you guys later.
Bye. So yeah, we've got two. We'd love to have anybody else jump in with this discussion. David, love Israel. It's awesome. Yeah. I love seeing, like, she's was right on the Gaza border and the different things that she's doing. So you can follow Davy at Davy Sutton on all social media. And she is also at thedailyaffair.com, where you can see a lot of her travel stuff also. And then again, if you're just joining us, I'm here with Kristin Winet, and we're talking about problems and solutions with traditional travel writing and how whether it's from a feminism point of view or how we are treating are we doing right by the locals, by the local economy and the local people and things like that, and our constraints as travel writers and how we do our job. So again, if you've got anything you'd like to add, please jump on into this conversation. I think it's a great conversation we need to have more of in our industry. So I want to ask you, Kristin, I know that you had talked about, you said that when travel writing is done problematic, the 21st century travel writing is not only, just like I had said, harmful to the world and its inhabitants, but it upholds colonialism and builds borders instead of breaking them. Let's talk a little bit about the idea of building those borders versus breaking them.
Well, I think one of the things that we always are dealing with as travel writers is representing the other, representing the community that we're visiting. And it's interesting that Davy was saying, she's kind of working with all these different perspectives in Israel. And I was just in Israel on a press trip in October, and it was one of those experiences that really shook me kind of to the core, because it was so nuanced and there were so many perspectives on the issues with Gaza and with the issue with the Palestinians and the Israelis. And I thought, well, in lieu of being sort of a current events reporter, which I'm certainly not, it was more sort of, how do I tell some of these stories? How do I tell some of these stories in a way that is meaningful to the people there? And so, I was working on this one story about a Bedouin man who I met and sort of became friends with, who was selling jewelry. And it was a really hard story for me to write, because as I was writing it, I felt like the whole time I had to think about how I was constructing him, like how I wanted to describe him, how I wanted to describe myself and our interactions, so that it didn't seem like I was just saying, oh, I met this man in a market and he sold me this jewelry at the end. I wanted to bring him and his world to the front and center of the piece. And I really had a hard time with that. And so what I did was I just acknowledged some of those things in the article. I said, I was interested in this guy because, he's a person, and he's got this unbelievable history of, coming from a nomadic family who now makes their living selling jewelry to tourists in a flea market in Tel Aviv, and he's got his own story that I'll never fully understand. And I've got my story that he'll never fully understand, because to him, in our limited communication that we could have together, I probably appeared like a typical blonde white tourist from America, and so I brought that up in the article, and I pushed for keeping it in there, because I thought this is where we can actually have these conversations about if we're doing justice by the people that we meet, and turning them into real people, if we are writing feature pieces or pieces that highlight a particular person or individual. And I felt really
interesting because you said you pushed to keep it in there. Was that something that was going to get scrapped?
Yes, because it was seen as sort of editorializing or meandering from the story. But it didn't get scrapped because I said, well, this is important to the perspective of the story. Is, here's two people who really can't communicate, and here's what happens. And so yeah, I think it was definitely something that I pushed for, because the blog that I was writing it for definitely is okay with first person narrative, which not all publications are. So that was something that I had to my benefit. Was it's sort of a place for storytelling anyhow. So it was just about sort of saying, I think this is important context. If that makes sense.
So I think that's a good takeaway, is that, because the waters have gotten muddled, and there's not a line now between, travel journalists and bloggers and travel writers, and who knows what any of that actually means anymore. But you can still be an advocate for your piece and what is important. And if you really are trying to up that level of your professionalism, I think that it inherently comes with it, is the responsibility for advocacy to what your story truly is.
Oh, I love that. That's great, Lori. I love it. Oh, that's so true.
Because we've all. I've had pieces like that I did for the local big Atlanta paper where I felt dirty afterwards. I went down a road that my editor took me, and I felt dirty afterwards. And you know what? It was received bad too. And I knew it. I knew what was right for it. But it's that I'm getting paid. They're paying me to do this. I'll do what they, but we have to be advocates for our stories.
I think that's great, because that's where we can start to make those small changes that do right by our pieces and do right by the genre of travel writing.
Absolutely.
I think that's great. Advocacy is a huge part of this.
Absolutely. So, well, do you have, I know we were running a little late, but I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up here soon. I think this is a conversation we could go on for hours with. And I'd love for us to find more platforms to be able to do this. I think this is one of those that, if more conferences, I think this is a great, platform for a conference. These type of things we need to talk about more as we go forward in the change in the advent of digital media. And I'm going to ask you one last thing about that, and we'll kind of wrap things up. But aside from what we've talked about and just traditional travel writing, where do you feel actual digital media is mucking it up for us, and how do we? Where does that add that whole other level of difficulty, and how can we be both aware of it and, advocate over those humps?
Over those humps. Oh, that's such a good question. How does digital media muck things up? Well, I think we often use digital media without thinking critically about what we're doing a lot of times. Maybe not us specifically, but a lot of users of digital media. They'll just publish or, put a photo on Instagram, or, without thinking about, is this, image, for instance, promoting third worldism in a way that I don't want to? Or is, maybe I should have shifted my camera angle to put this person more on my eye level, for instance. We often just sort of publish things without thinking about them. I know I've been guilty of that, because I'm like, oh, this is such a great picture. I want to get this up for my followers. I think it's really a good picture. And then I've thought about it afterwards, and I've thought, yeah, I may have kind of edited that or worked on it a little bit, or maybe taken a couple extra shots, to kind of rethink what I posted. But and I think especially with food writing and food porn on even digital media, we often just kind of post pictures of food. And one of the things that my research and in talking to other travel writers has shown me is that often kind of upholds this idea that food just sort of exists and that there isn't anybody behind who made it. Was it a woman? What was her labor like? Where did this food come from? All of those questions that I think we as feminists ask ourselves, especially about stuff that's like domestic, like food and being served and things like that. And I think that food porn, for instance, can kind of continue to ignore that side of things. And I know I've been guilty of it myself.
But we all have. I mean, you can't be in this and not, Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting is, I was at a Travel Massive meeting last night, and this kind of came up, and as we were talking about culinary travel, and it's those, finding the faces behind some of this food. And I was talking about, there's this lady that I'm just trying to find the right outlet for her story. It was amazing. And she's a lady who sells pralines and popcorn in the Sweet Auburn market, but her story is amazing. She was a Katrina, evacuee, but she just has this face that just like you can't help but just feel good. And she gives you a hug. It's the best thing that you get out of the whole thing is these great, amazing hugs from her. But so it again, there's more of this that can be told. Delia's chiming in saying, yes, she'd like to see more outlets, networks, and conferences for those doing this work and wanting to connect with others and support one another. I could see some great information about sharing, about outlets to work well, about signal boosting for thoughtful conflict. And that's actually, she says, what her talk at the Women in Travel Summit is all about. I'm so excited. I'm so sorry I'm missing that. I was hoping to be there this year, but I can't. Talking about sending the biases contained in our words and our images and how much responsibility we have in our work to our audience and our subjects. So I'm going to give you, if you'll get, Kristin, I'm going to sign this off and we're going to stop the recording. If anybody wants to hang around and talk a little bit more, Kristin, if you have time, I don't know what your schedule is like, we'll keep this open and keep the discussion going. Delia, if you want to jump in, this is again, I think this is how we do these, is just continue these conversations. But Kristin, give us your top three takeaways. What should travel writers do to help counteract this issue?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we need to be advocates for our work, as you said. I think we need to keep pushing for getting our words out there. I think we need to have these conversations at conferences, like the Women in Travel Summit, because that's where we can all sort of come together and talk about these complicated things, because the solutions aren't necessarily cut and dry. It's not like, okay, solution 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, done. And I think third, I think it's important to think about that marriage, as you were saying, between being good travel writers and paying the bills and what we can do with things like SEO or, social media sharing and things like that. I think kind of keeping that in the back of our minds as we move forward and as digital media continues to evolve, I think that that's something that we need to keep in the back of our minds as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Kristin, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. You guys, if you want to follow Kristin, as she is Kristin Winet, at Kristin Winet, Kristin Winet. Up in the comments, I've put a lot of her contact information. You can find her there. Lori MacBrown at Lori MacBrown everywhere on social media. And we're missing my sidekick, Davy Sutton. She is at Davy Sutton, and she is actually in Israel right now. She joined us for just a little bit. But one thing I do want to mention is she is going to be doing a Facebook Live from her dinner around 8 8:30 from the center rooftop in Jerusalem. So if you're interested, follow her at Davy Sutton for that. That should be really a neat, some of her imagery and what she's bringing back from Jerusalem right now. But we're going to end our official. If you want to stay for the after show, we'll do a little after show. Love to have some of y'all join us on here, talk to Kristin a little bit more. But thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing everybody next Tuesday on Travel Scope at noon on Blab Eastern Standard Time. Have a great one. Bye.
Bye, everybody.